Daniel,
Hey, George.
welcome back to another episode of Option 5. How's your child's bedroom? It appears that you're in today.
It's really nice.
Yeah.
I was in it way too much yesterday, though.
Working on the house, huh?
Well, IKEA, I mean, you really got to dedicate a whole day. They really bring you in, and not in a wooing way. They just bring you in and be like, hey, dummy, you bought it. And take
Deal with
some
it.
time to fix it and put it together. Yep. So, yeah, I'm underneath a little loft bed here. I'm proud of the work, but,
It looks cozy.
Yeah,
looks cozy.
From 12 to 7 yesterday.
On a not great transition, I'm just going to invite him in right now. Rob LaFeve is with us today, joining us from his room with some bird diagram in the background.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I kind of took this room over from one of my kids, and the poster stayed.
I love it.
You shifted your room. I noticed that we couldn't see the closet doors last time.
Yeah, I kind of did a
little
90
mm-hmm.
degree.
Like it.
That's what I did with my Memorial Day. Rearranged my office.
Just gotta adapt. You gotta
Exactly.
keep yourself on your toes. Well, cool. Well, thanks, Rob. We never know. There's not a great way that we start our podcast. So if people stick with us past the introductions, then we just assume you guys are super fans. So thank you for making it through that. Rob, welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited to have you here with us today. Rob is, Rob, you've been with us. You were number one. You technically were before Dan even.
3 whole months.
And
I have a pin that I never wear in the office, but it says, "Remember, you were number one."
Is that a thing?
No.
Okay. I was
That's
like,
a joke.
if that happens, I love it. And why didn't we make that happen?
That's right.
Rob's been at Crema for 10 years, right? We passed the big 10, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
10 years in January? Yeah, January 1st.
So
thereabouts, yeah.
Crazy. You started at Crema as a designer, really was our only designer for a long time, and then made the leap into you were doing front-end programming on our websites and things like that, and then transitioned fully into front-end development, like at its core. Tell me, why'd you do that?
What was the impetus? What drew you? Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting story because it's pretty unique that we foster people trying to adapt and learn and grow and constantly improve. And you that's a pretty massive transition into being one of our senior architects, our directors of engineering here. I mean, like you are really on our leadership team now, leading the charge for what we do as a front-end development agency. What led you down that path to make that change? I just want to go back a little bit, and then we'll talk about going forward.
I mean, it's interesting to actually try to think back for me, because it seems like it was such a long time ago, but also
It was a long time ago, yeah.
It seemed like a pretty gradual change for a long time, and then something just kind of snapped, and it's like, no, I want to do this. I really enjoy the development aspect of this, and I can let go of guiding the design process and kind of take up this new adventure, and still learning, still a lot to know. There always will be, which is partially what's so exciting about programming to me. So I think that was overall the draw. It's just making things work and figuring out how to do that better each day. Yeah.
Rob, do you remember how that started? Was it a client project that you wanted to hey, I think I can, take a look under the hood and try to figure out what this looks like? Or I don't remember how it started.
I did a lot of collaboration with Ross Brown, who's a legend around here.
Rest in peace.
He's still alive,
really,
people.
He's still alive.
He's still alive and well.
Here. I miss him a lot. Yeah.
So Ross and I were working hand in hand to produce these application features. I was handling the CSS, HTML kind of elements of it. But I was there kind of in that context, writing commits, having him review my changes, merging those in. So a lot of the development process was something I was being exposed to, even though I wasn't necessarily doing any heavy lifting on the programming side. But I was being exposed to that as well. And there was a certain point, I believe, where I think Ross and Derek came back from a conference and they were talking about learning or seeing React presented, and how it was kind of a different approach to what we were used to. I think at that point we were using Angular for our front end applications, and I had been dabbling with Angular as well, kind of starting to get in there, learning the nuts and bolts of it. Still very confused, but loving it. But when they came back and talked about React, and that was on my radar, suddenly it was like, okay, I actually want to buckle down and learn this this JavaScript thing, which is the language that we write in for the browser, and while I'm at it, learn React. And React really clicked for me from like a mental model standpoint.
Yeah.
And but it also leans very heavily on just vanilla JavaScript, right? So you're writing JavaScript all the way through, whereas some of these other frameworks have some syntactic sugar that kind of obscures some of the low-level kind of mechanisms that you might use to get work done. So
Syntactic
React really
sugar.
just
I really like
syntactic sugar.
I
like
latched
that a
onto
lot.
that as well. I was like, that's a wonderful phrase.
Yeah. So anyways, that's kind of how it happened. Just getting exposed to it and getting that itch.
So fast forward a little bit. I'm sorry, Dan. I'm just
go ahead.
going for it.
You do it.
You about a year and a half ago, is when we introduced, the company had grown, right? We got into close to 40 people. Maybe it was a little less than that at the time, but Dan and I and Matt were really thinking about how might we bring up a group of leaders inside of Crema, and you were kind of crucial to that team being formed. Can you tell us a little bit about that team, what it is at Crema, what that team does, and then I want to dive into maybe how are we thinking about that team being like any other team inside the organization, but trying to operate with a different purpose, maybe. So tell me a little bit about the team first.
Yeah, so we refer to it internally as the Crema leadership team, I believe. Is that the team you're referring to?
I think that's the team I'm referring to.
And,
yes.
And a subset of that is what we refer to as the management team, which is I guess just excludes Matt, George, and Dan here. But the leadership team, yeah, it really is an effort from my perspective to expand that that set of individuals who has the knowledge or the context to make some of these high-level decisions at Crema. And for the longest time, it had been George and you, Dan, and Matt. You brought him in a few years back to head the technical side of things. But as we're growing, it just wasn't scalable. So. So I think that was probably the main impetus, but I know also there's this sense that you are wanting to, you've said this before, you want to replace yourselves to some degree and get people on board who maybe have fresh perspectives or unique skill sets that they can speak into the needs of the company at that level. So yeah, I was super humbled to be considered for that. I've always considered myself kind of a nose down, in the work kind of person. So it's been a huge challenge for me to sort of get out of that mindset and kind of apply some of the things or the problem solving skills that I enjoy utilizing on the programming side, actually bringing those to bear at a higher level with the company. Yeah,
that's helpful. So that team is made up now of, there's two kind of technical leads, if you will. So you and CK, because the development team is the largest team inside of our organization, we have two technical managers. Then there's product management, strategy and design, and
Test engineering.
Test engineering, which Matt oversees as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's been really cool is to see that team lean into not only the flourishing of Crema, but really the flourishing of the people on each of your teams, and just being just knowing your teams really well. So instead of a lot of companies might have it set up in more of a hierarchical way of being over top of maybe a director of a division. Ours is more about craft right now, at least. So each of those leaders sits over a craft team, so a specialty of a team. Oftentimes those individuals maybe don't get to work with each other on a daily basis, but they're all aiming to become experts of a similar craft. So you oversee a group of developers that are all experts in JavaScript in some way, or becoming experts in JavaScript.
Right. Yeah.
What are some of the disciplines specifically when it comes to being now this leadership of a technical team? What are some of the rhythms or the disciplines that you guys do on a regular basis to foster that team, to foster that craft?
Yeah. So on the technical side, you mentioned CK, the other lead architect, myself, Matt, who's kind of the director of the whole tech team. We meet regularly, just put our heads together. We're talking about challenges that we're experiencing, whether it's people problems or process problems, and of course celebrating wins and just sharing information in that way. I think one of the things I've had to challenge myself to do is actually be okay with stepping back and letting other people take the reins on certain things. It's hugely important to do because now I exist in kind of these three realms, leadership, management, and I'm also still doing day-to-day production work as well. So knowing how to play in each of those strata in the right way and at the right time has been one of the biggest challenges for me. But it also gives me a full picture of what's happening from the lowest level to the highest level, which is a unique perspective to have. So again, going back to some of the processes, disciplines, we of course do one-on-ones. I have 8 people that I do one-on-ones with. And so that's kind of 4 each week, split it up that way by bi-weekly one-on-ones. And CK is doing the same with the other team. And so, yeah, we're spending regular time with the whole development team, just seeing how things are going, especially right now with the current state of things. It's been hugely important. So keeping that finger on the pulse is huge. And also I kind of always joke around. It's like can be my personal one-on-one too sometimes. It's like, man, I'm really
it goes both ways,
this.
doesn't it?
It does. And sometimes I feel myself probably leaning too far that direction. Like, man, how would you do this? Or what do you think about this? Or, but I also trust these people. I don't see myself as this person who has any greater knowledge than they do. I'm playing a specific role in the organization, serving them in that way, and I get to benefit as a result too. So,
Rob, what about you mentioned the 3 strata in which you operate in? So still doing day-to-day work, but being a member of the manager team and also the leadership team. It's easy to be like, man, this is unmanageable. It's like, I don't have enough categories in my brain or whatever to continue to, access different parts of me, and one, I'm trying to be as strategic as I can, where the other one is like, there's hardly any strategy. I just need to get things done. So what are some disciplines that you've employed, that you've had to learn, that you're still just, putzing your way through, as we all do, to help manage that new, and it's not just workload. Workload's one thing, but it's also managing a different way of thinking that almost has to pivot back and forth within minutes. And so what are some things you've done, either organizing your week, your calendar? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think it starts there. Time management. It used to be that when I was solely playing a production role on a project, I knew what was going on with the project. I knew what my tasks were, and I knew where I was in those tasks, and I knew when the sprint deadline was coming up and what I had to get done, right? So I think adding those layers has actually forced me to live in my calendar a lot more, live and die by events on my calendar, where I know that those events are meaningful, that it's not just, well, yeah, I said I'd go to that, but I don't really intend to, that kind of thing. So I really live and die by that. Also, utilizing, I'm blanking on the name of this, and Dan, you could probably help me, but organizing tasks into kind of the four quadrants of important and urgent and all permutations of that.
Yeah, Covey's quadrants.
Is it Covey's quadrants? Yeah. So trying to think in those categories as well. I've played around with actual tools that, task management tools that have that matrix, and you can organize things into that. I tend to lean on those when I'm feeling the pressure more so than kind of in a typical week. I think most weeks it's manageable, or it seems manageable, and I don't lean on those tools too heavily. But yeah, the time management aspect of it, and just being aware of my own limitations to effectively switch contexts well, is something that I've had to really appreciate about myself. So I've gone through many iterations of trying to do one-on-ones at different ways, one per day. I'll have a one-on-one each afternoon except for Friday or something like that. I found that knowing that meeting was coming up in my afternoon, it kind of crippled me because I was constantly looking towards that meeting, right? And so I found that actually grouping all of those into one day and just knowing that I'm in the mindset of today, success looks like getting through these meetings and doing a good job and putting thought into them. That really changed things. So it's been a lot of trial and error. I've gone, back and forth on a lot of these things. So that's one example.
Yeah, I do something similar, Rob, for my one-on-ones, because I've got about 6 or 7 people that report to me right now. And I joke with my kids when I'm having breakfast on that day. It's every other Thursday for me. And it's like, happy one-on-one day, everybody, maybe may the odds be ever in your favor,
Yes.
and then head off to just a series of back-to-back meetings. But I'm with you. That posture, that mindset of saying today's purpose is X really helps me, because I think you named something that's really important. I think a lot of people struggle with this, especially in a team or an organization that might have you switching a lot. And you're dealing with that switching cost. And we've talked about that a lot over the years, but I think switching cost is maybe something that we should spend some more time thinking.
It's my dog snoring.
That's hilarious.
Could you hear it?
Yeah, just barely. That was so good.
Just a little. Yeah.
I think the switching cost is something that in the future we should spend a bit more time on, because we've talked about the dangers of some things you've already named, which are silos and bottlenecks, right? Like by giving yourself away and not trying to take over everything, you're trying to remove that bottleneck of you having to be involved in everything.
Right.
But I think the switching cost is super important, no matter what role you're in, and even more so if you're in a leadership role, because you do have to kind of shift your mind to a lot of different initiatives. I think that's something, I'm kind of making a mental note on that, because I think that's something that's really important. I think a lot of people probably struggle with. It's that deep work, or that deep, what is it? Deep work time? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's not only, I think something I'm realizing, it's not only just switching. So if I'm doing development work and one of my teammates pings me like, hey, can I get eyes on this? Like, that doesn't feel like a huge switch. I'm going from looking at my code to looking at somebody else's code. Yeah, it's broken my momentum a little bit. But I'm still in the same context and the same level of abstraction.
Yeah.
So that's a very low level abstraction. And so I've found that sometimes what's even more difficult for me is switching from like a high level abstraction, which is
Uh-huh.
the leadership part of things. It's everything's kind of compared to code, nebulous
Hmm.
and a little scary and a little loose.
Code,
So
code scares me. So I think there's
it's
just
scary too, but it's a different if it's a different thing,
right.
and so switching between those levels of abstraction is a good thing to be
Hmm.
mindful of
Mm-hmm.
when you're doing it, especially if you're used to operating just kind of in one tier.
Yeah, I think
Rob,
that's really interesting.
Rob, another posture that I heard in your career timeline that I think is important for specifically for anyone who's going from maybe switching from one craft to another and then going from getting really, really good at that craft and then moving towards like a management or leadership position is the posture of grit. And it's just top of mind for me right now, just because of a book I'm reading. But that aspect of grit is a combination of passion and perseverance. And passion is less about intensity, but your interest and your willingness to stay with that interest over a consistent time period.
Hmm.
And so you said two things in there that I thought was really, and this is to affirm you of when you first started developing, you're like, I was out of my depth, but you stayed with it. And then when going from a master of your craft to leadership, you said it was a huge challenge and still is a huge challenge, but you're still doing it and you're still getting better. And so those two things just stuck out to me as far as like, no matter how you're progressing, if you're going from a novice to an intermediate to an expert, or even going, flipping from expert to like, well, I'm not really going to build anymore. I'm going to lead and manage. There's this aspect of I'm having to keep going. And so approaching each day, each project, each season of your career with this mindset of grit. I don't think it's common, but I think it's one that's needed. And it's one that, I don't know, just as you've been talking, it's like, wow, this is a great story of just staying and sticking with it. So
You gotta love the pain. That's
that's true.
takes
Yeah. You
takes
gotta
me.
love the pain because
Yeah,
training is pain, no matter what,
yeah,
how you skin it.
But
yeah.
I think
I see
go ahead.
parallels there all the time between that kind of physical aspect of like I know this is good for me, but
Mm-hmm.
it's work every single time you
Mm-hmm.
get on that treadmill or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the same way with all of this, for sure. And I've seen that correlation more and more strongly as time
Mm-hmm.
goes on.
Mm-hmm.
As we talk about our disciplines, postures, and structures as being this kind of framework that we're using to assess a lot of this stuff, right? What you're, in my mind, it helps me because what you're defining is as a shift in structure, right? As something that was kind of permanent in nature of things, something you're becoming a master of. You're really naming this is what my title is. It's who I am in some ways, and then going, oh, I'm going to change that. I'm going to break that bone right now that's really strong and watch it reheal into something new and even maybe even stronger and different. It is painful. It is hard. Like you say, doing a workout, you do tear muscles in order to get
Right.
stronger. And I think that's such a great analogy. I'm glad you mentioned because it is painful. And it even means, I think something we try maybe subconsciously, we should say it more outwardly, is that we understand there may be even a loss in productivity during that
Mm-hmm.
time. Because as you press into that new structure, as you press into those new sets of disciplines and postures and processes, um, it is painful and you're
Mm-hmm.
still learning how to get your legs, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it takes time. I think a lot of people, a lot of organizations, a lot of teams aren't patient enough to get through that
Mm-hmm.
transition period. But it does take a lot of, like Dan said, grit and patience to say, nope, I'm sticking with this. We're going to get better at it. I will learn. I'll grow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you
What?
start to see that in others as well around you.
Yeah.
You have to remind yourself the only way I know a right way to do this in any of one of these kind of layers is because I've failed,
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
many times before I kind of landed on some sort of realization of the correct way, or formed a mental structure or model, that I can
Mm-hmm.
utilize moving forward. And sometimes it takes time. And so being patient with yourself, being
Mm-hmm.
patient with others, um,
Yeah. That's
yeah,
good.
it's totally necessary.
I'm curious. We work in our product teams in a cross discipline way. What because you talked about perspectives, and I think that's one of the things that Dan and I were so excited when we were putting that leadership team together was, and Matt and I were the fact that we were going to get this fresh perspectives to our conversation, and that they weren't all basically just us. Like it wasn't like, oh, cool, another George, and oh, cool, another Dan, and oh, whatever. But all of a sudden getting this more diverse point of view. You've been in it for a year and a half now. How do you describe that to your friends when you say, I'm on this leadership team, it's made up of a bunch of different people from different crafts, different personalities, but I don't know, for me, it's like, but it's, wow, it works really, really well.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, it models the structure that we have in our product teams, right?
Yeah,
so we've got people, we have Tuck, who's a product manager. So he's very organizationally minded and is kind of that hub or the glue that kind of holds all of us together. I don't think anybody would argue with that. And then you've got CK, myself, Matt, who are much more, we have that firsthand experience with the technical implementation of things.
Yeah.
There's some unique muscles that have been exercised there. But then you have folks like Tyler, who's just seeing the big picture, seeing opportunities, asking the what if questions, almost as a reflex, right? And whereas my reflex is always, why not? And it's not they're not bad questions. They're just different reflexes. And I think the crafts either lend themselves to people who think a certain way, or you learn to think a certain way in those respective crafts. But one thing that I've found hugely important is recognizing that we do come to the table with those default hats on, right?
Yeah.
I'm totally blanking on the guy's name, but the 6 hats of thinking, right? The 6 thinking hats. And there's one that's black hat, and that's the one I wear by default. You can just picture me with a black top hat on. I come into the room with that hat on, and sometimes I don't even realize I have it on. But if I can be mindful of the fact that I have it on, I can consciously take it off and put on the what if hat, the green hat or whatever the color is, that represents a certain way of thinking. So I think I've been forced to learn more about myself and the other members of that leadership team, and how we might be coming to the table with those default sort of attitudes in an unconscious way many times. And that, I think that's where frustration can arise, is when you're unconsciously always wearing the black hat or so being cognizant of that has been huge. I've got a weed whacker going on outside.
It's fine. But I think what's awesome, Rob, about the way that you describe that is that, it may have taken getting through some frustrating times where you go, man, we're just not clicking and we do not see things that but then recognizing that and naming that and leaning in to say, what is it about the way that we're approaching this same core desire to make Crema great, to make this team great, to make our people great? But we are approaching it with different perspectives and different attitudes and different mindsets, and that's okay. It takes time to work those things out. And I think it's really awesome to see how that team has kind of clicked in over time, even more so. And there's a trust that comes from the fact that, you love to polish things. You love it to be done a certain way. And you had that confidence that there is a way things ought to be, right? Like you said, Tyler is always talking in analogies. It's like, I think I know what you're saying, but you just told a story for 20 minutes and I want to wrap myself, so everybody kind of approaches that in a different perspective. And I think it ends up being a beautiful thing. Again, if you're patient, you have the grit to.
Yeah. It's like a boulder rolling down the hill.
There's
a bunch of other boulders.
Oh, I don't know. I said the first thing that came. I don't know. I just wanted to say an analogy.
I was like, so the boulders are bumping up against each other, knocking off rough edges. Okay. Good analogy, Dan.
Out of curiosity, what's something maybe that's fresh for you guys right now? What's something that you're paying attention to as a team, or maybe as an individual? What's something that you're focused into, or you're excited about that leadership team, the work that Crema is doing right now, or where we're going right now? What's something that you've had your headspace in, or maybe the team has had its headspace in, to pay attention to as we're moving forward and growing?
Yeah, I think what immediately jumps to my mind is work that we've been doing around actually identifying what our core is at Crema, right? So that we can all be on the same page, whether it's sales to the product team, right? So it's easier said than done because it's something that, again, sounds intuitive, and most of it is intuitive. And that's what is hard about it, is that you have all these intuitions. You don't necessarily have concrete words to put on paper. And so coming up with those concrete words, putting them down, presenting them to the whole team, I think there's a power in doing that, just putting it out there. So we identified our core really hinges around product teams. Like that is the nucleus of our core, right?
Yeah,
so product teams, cross-disciplinary teams that come together with all of those diverse viewpoints and skills. That's what it takes to work with our clients on a day-to-day basis and actually build products that matter. So even that was a shift for me, because I tend to think of like, well, at the core, we are the thing, the core thing we do is this output, this set of output. And it's true, that's part of it. It's part of the equation, but it's not the distinguishing factor. So that was one of the things that you and all of us here, we kind of have gone back and forth on that, and coming at it from different perspectives with certain assumptions. It can be a frustrating process, but at the end of the day, I feel like we got on the same page and we had a better output as a result.
It's so good and so important to write those things down, because like you said, it's so easy to intuit. If someone does something, you're like, oh, that's not a principle of ours. And someone could be like, how do you know that? I'm like, I don't know. I just know.
Right. Where is it written?
Yeah. Right. It's like, for our family 2 years ago, we actually went through this process of writing down our family mission statement, which was the hardest thing ever. It's like, I know exactly what we value, because if my kids start acting away, it's like, stop doing that. Well, why not? We don't value that behavior. But they're like, well, why? And I'm like, because we don't. So but going through the process of actually writing down what's important to you, because you're picky on words, you're picky on like this word really means something. It is a hard process to go through, but it then now serves back. Everything goes back to it. It's like, hey, we're going to make this decision as a family or a company. Why? Because it goes back to this, because we took the time to write it down and all. And I feel like if you don't have tension around something like that, you're not doing it right. No, there should be, it's so important to everybody that there should be tension. Yeah. There should be some level of, debate and discussion around it, because everyone believes in it and wants
the stakes
to be right. The stakes are high.
Yeah. Stakes are high. Yeah.
Yep.
I now feel like I'm not that great of a dad. I got to go back and write a mission statement with my family.
I don't have one either.
Okay, gosh.
That was my sole purpose instead of that.
No, that's good. I think what I was quite transparently, and we can share this, Rob, you and we butted heads a little bit through that process. And it was coming out the other side of it, where the presentation that I think it was literally up until like days before we were supposed to present this to the rest of the company. We had a deadline. We set a constraint for ourselves to say, we got to share this. And then the presentation happened, and I don't know if I was on camera, but I just remember being in the background, just being like, yes, this landed in such an incredible space. And it wasn't exactly what I said. It wasn't exactly what you said. It was kind of this this beautiful marriage of all of our perspectives coming together and saying, no, what really matters to us is not something brand new. It's actually something we've been doing for a long time. We just needed to name it. Going back, it made me think, oh, what was the beginning of Option 5 about? The whole first season was about cross-discipline product teams. It's like, yeah, that did really matter. That does really matter to us. And naming that is really important.
And sometimes you just don't have the structures in place to know where to place something like that. Where does it fit in the overall structure? So it takes a while to figure those things out.
So let's end on this. What's something that you're excited about going forward? So we've kind of finished this Crema core recently, but what's something that, we're all working from home. We're in the middle of a pandemic, but what's something you're excited about coming out, maybe into the latter half of 2020 into 2021, for Crema, for your team? Where are you getting jazzed right now?
I was thinking about this earlier, actually, and it definitely rings true on the development side because that's where I'm kind of my passions lie. But I think it applies to the whole team. But just taking it to the next level, asking the question, okay, now that we've identified this core, it's still very like generic. I mean, really, it's high level. It's a high level description of who we are, and that's intentional because we need that level of flexibility underneath it. But okay, now that we've at least defined this, how do we level up? What does leveling up look like?
Yeah.
So I think that's where I get excited. As a polisher, I'm excited to see what it looks like to really gel as a team, be on the same page, not just with other developers, but with the UI designers, with the product managers, testers. So, and then with sales, even like knowing that we're going to get projects through the door that are no brainers, right? They align with what we do, and we're going to excel because they align with who we are. So that gets me excited. So that plays into a lot of different areas: hiring, establishing some kind of way to measure whether or not somebody would be a natural fit in our team, from whether it's a skill perspective or just our values. But those are all things that are so much easier to say than to actually do. And so we're just starting down this road of actually, okay, now that we've got our North Star, which is this core, how do we actually embody it and flesh that out day-to-day life? So yeah, that's kind of where I'm getting excited for sure.
Dude, I love it.
Rob, you make me smile.
Yeah, man.
Oh, good.
The three of us together again. It's like the early days.
Wear that pin though. Find that pin and wear it.
I was the first. We probably should get that pin for him. But dude, thank you again. I mean, it's been an awesome journey. I love the experience of building Crema with you and seeing you adapt into the person you are today is incredible. So I'm pumped for. I thought I'd be going into this season with everything that was happening in the world, mourning a lot, quite transparently. And there was a period of that where it was like, oh man, my structure just changed. It hurts. I'm not comfortable. I'm in crisis mode. I was fed by it because there was a creativity, but I was just like, man, things aren't the same. I'm now starting to turn that corner of going, you know what? I'm actually really excited about where we're potentially going. So pumped that you're here doing it with us, man.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Well, thank you everybody for listening to another episode of Option 5. If you haven't already, make sure that you subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Pocket Cast. Rob, what do you listen to podcasts? Are you a podcast guy?
I do, yeah.
What do you listen to?
I use the good old iTunes or podcast
I forget app. You're like an Apple through and through guy. You use Apple Mail. You use all the Apple software as well.
Yeah, it's complicated, but
okay, we won't. A topic for another podcast.
Sure.
So definitely subscribe on the whatever you use to listen to your podcast. If you can, also it'd be awesome if you went to iTunes because it's one of the only platforms that you can leave reviews on. So go give us a 5-star review. And if you're thinking about building adaptive product teams, if you're thinking about your company moving towards cross-discipline work, definitely think about sharing this podcast with your bosses, with your peers, maybe with other people in the industry, because that is something back to our core that we're really excited about, is how to help people build product teams, build cross-discipline perspectives, and adapt to an ever-changing world. So thank you guys, as always, for listening, and I think we'll see you guys next time.
Hi, I'm Kylie Bullets. I'm an application developer at Crema. I help write code and build quality products for our clients. During my workday, I work with multiple team members such as test engineers, product managers, designers, and other developers to help bring our clients' ideas to life. I enjoy working at Crema because every day I'm presented with new challenges that are constantly pushing me to learn and grow in my craft. I love being a part of this team because we genuinely support each other in our pursuits of constant improvement. Option 5 is a podcast by Crema, a digital product agency that creates web and mobile apps for disruptive companies and industry leaders. We believe that design, technology, and culture can help create a world where individuals and companies thrive. Learn more at crema.us.